Well, joining me on Hogg's vlog is the captain from the West Indies, Jason Holder. Now, the reason why I've got him on board is because Pat Cummins, the fast bowler from Australia, has taken over the captaincy, and there's a lot of talk about Pat being able to handle the job with the workload of a fast bowler. So it's quite tough being captain, leading your team, but then having to bowl all those overs as a fast bowler, then help your other fast bowlers to get the plans right. It is equally tough and very mentally draining. So, Jason Holder, welcome. You've captained the West Indies 37 times, I believe. Is that right, at test level?
It sounds correct.
Yeah, sounds correct. All right. Hopefully I've done my research. I'm pretty sure there'll be someone out there that will correct me on the comments downstairs. But before we get into that particular scenario, you've been away for 8 months. You have not been home and seen your family or friends for 8 months. How tough is that on you?
Look, it's been a challenge, Hoggy, man. Yeah, I do understand the crisis in the world that we're in at the moment with the pandemic and, just these new variants popping up here and there. But it has been just mentally challenging and draining, being stuck in a bubble, and you literally have no freedom and no ways to unwind. I suppose some places you go in the world, there's not much flexibility in terms of places you can go, but for many other places in the world, you can go and, you can have a lot of downtime and things to really unwind and take your mind away from the game, which I think is really crucial. But yeah, it's been challenging just being able to stay focused, man, because you tend to drift, and especially particularly when things are not going well. It's even harder to just continuously G yourself up every day to keep going. If you're in a bad spot with your cricket, it's just so hard to one, turn it around, but then two, find that mental capacity to drive yourself to keep going. And only the tough, can really withstand it. And I salute every single cricketer who's been through it, every single sportsman who's been in a bubble, man, because God knows it's not an easy thing to do. But look, it is what it is. I'm still grateful to be actually playing and working. So I guess that's a positive way to look at it. But, I think going forward, we still need to find ways to find a little bit more flexibility.
Yeah, I don't think everyone understands the complexities of it, because you play with your national team, you play with your team in Barbados when you're home, but then you go and play for a franchise like Sunrisers Hyderabad, and if you don't have any of your countrymen in there, it can even be tougher for that couple of months as well, couldn't it? Because it's very hard just to go and find friendships with an Australian and an Englishman where you can really lay your head on their shoulder and just go, look, I'm going through a tough time right now.
Yeah, absolutely correct, man. But to be fair, and to the credit of the teams that I've been in outside of the Caribbean, guys have been very, very welcoming and very supportive of each other. I mean, we've all been through it. We all go through it. And I suppose you still have that one or two individuals that you gravitate towards who you can, let a little bit more on their shoulders than some. But for the most part, it has been great for me personally being in the Sunrisers Hyderabad team. I've built bonds and friendships that I'm sure will last me for a lifetime. And, credit to each and every individual in our group. I think that group was a tightly knit bunch. And, we've been able to support one another off the field quite nicely. I mean, things probably didn't go our way on the field, but certainly off the field, we built some strong relationships. And I think that's exactly the kind of environment you need to get through these bubbles, man. I mean, there's a bit of activity going on in and around the hotel, but that can only suffice for so long. You'd still then need that personal relationship and those personal bonds, to drive you through. But yeah, it hasn't been as tough as you would imagine it to be, being in a foreign dressing room.
Well, that's good news to hear, because you want to hear that the players are feeling comfortable in those foreign environments. And it would have been interesting for me actually going back when I went to Sri Lanka. I played in a team there where I was the only white guy in the actual team, and it was a different experience for me. But if I had to do that in a bubble environment, I had Jay Wardner in there, but it would have made me feel a little bit awkward in that particular scenario. So the West Indies that come over to Australia, where you're going into an all-white environment, how would that affect the likes of an Andre Russell and a Sonny Narayan?
Question. Particularly a lot of our West Indian boys stay in their rooms a lot, and really, I guess would lean on people back home via, these means, either whether it be WhatsApp calling, Zoom calling, whatever the case may be. But for me, I'm not really a big indoor person, and I think it comes down to personalities. I'm quite sociable. I love, getting around people. Since COVID has been around, I've been to Australia for Big Bash. I've been obviously to IPL. Those are the only two leagues outside of international cricket which I would have played. And I had a grand time in Australia, man. I must say, Sydney Sixers is it's one hell of a franchise, man. We had a great bunch of guys, and I love golf as well too. So you boys love your golf as well. So it was great to get it with like Dan Christian. James Vince. We had some really good times on the golf course, and then like on the cricket field, it was just superb, man. I actually spoke to Dan a couple weeks ago when his child was born. Just sent a message just to congratulate him. We were actually remarking on the game, the first BBL game this season, where it just seems as though like the Sixers could win from any place, man. And it was kind of a trend that we created last year. So I mean, just to see it continue, and I saw Flipper came and got 99 in the last game, and just took the game home. It just showed the depth of our squad. But I really enjoyed that bunch, man. I just said to the guys here, particularly, like being in our environment, man, was extremely great. I mean, it would honestly challenge a West Indian dressing room. And maybe surpass it. Just being in a group of guys, around a group of guys who love one another and love being in each other's space, man. So it was great. The 3 games I played with the Sixers was absolutely amazing, and we had a little bit more flexibility in Australia, obviously, with their situations, and they're locking down the whole entire country. So it wasn't as confined to the hotel as many other places I've been to. So that was awesome.
With all those stories, it just brings all these different cultures together, and that's what I've loved about the T20 environment. Like going to India, going to the Caribbean League, going to Sri Lanka, going to England. It's brought all of us closer in a sense where we've actually had to go out of our way to make sure that we catch up with everyone and we meet everyone. And the friendships that you've just brought up there, you'd have many from England, many from India now, and it's just fantastic in that regard. Now, you've just touched on the West Indies culture, and you're the captain there. Now, with the West Indies, you've got different countries. Former captain, yes. I didn't want to bring that up, but so with the different islands, they're different countries in a sense. So the different countries coming together. How hard is it to create a strong culture with those different countries coming together, especially when one island or one country might have the majority of players in a particular scenario in that particular environment?
Hoggy honestly asked me a question that I probably can't answer. Maybe that's why I lost the captaincy, but it is a great challenge, man. And for me personally, I've just found that unless you get strong support in and around the management around you and from a board level, is next to impossible. And I don't think being in a West Indies dressing room over these years, we've had that. There's always been a breakdown from maybe a team perspective correlating to a board perspective, and you never quite get 100% buy-in from everyone. There's always been questions asked here and there, and I guess there will always be questions asked here and there. But some of the decisions made, particularly in my time of playing for West Indies, have come or borderline having agendas around, and it's something that just, to me, has plagued West Indies cricket over a number of years. And for instance, if you've got a West Indies team with majority of Trinidadians or majority of Barbadians, everybody will always question why are there so many, and then a question from like a smaller territory, maybe a Leeward Islands or Windward Islands, would question like, why aren't there more? of our guys in the team. So, and you never actually ask the question, are these the best guys for like to represent West Indies? You know, have these guys merited their selection? The first question is always like, why can't we have more Barbadians? Why can't we have more Leeward Islanders? Why can't we have more Windward Islanders? And you want a product that is going to be successful and attractive, but yet you still want to bring these biases and these firm country-driven agendas into selecting. You know, and that has been a massive challenge over the years and continues to be a massive challenge. You know, I believe that we have selected the best personnel to represent West Indies, and if you look at their statistics based on what we have in the region, you know, particularly in our test team, they're the best. You know, yes, the results haven't gone for us consistently on the field, but I could sit down here and break down a number of other reasons as to why that happens. You know, I think we've got systematic flaws, which obviously need to be addressed. But to their defense, and when I say their defense, to the cricket board's defense, I just don't think financially we've got the resources to not only create but sustain a strong system that would harness development and personal growth. So we always gonna, in a sense, fluctuate in terms of our performances. We will have a good series, we may have a good tournament, but consistently over the years, I think we'll never ever get to the point where we can make a steady progression going forward based on what we have here as our resources.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to get you into the politics or anything like that, but I'll just say a statement on that is just looking at it. When I grew up, West Indies cricket was the leader, and they were thumping Australia in the 70s. They had the likes of Holding, Garner. I still remember Garner leaning over with his hat, Gilligan Island type hat. You were born when Garner was flying.
I remember. Yeah.
Yep. So I was watching him out the whacker, and he was fielding out gully, and he was bent over, and his shirt was tucked in, but he had his jock strap, the shirt tucked into the jock strap band, and there was so the jock strap's hanging, and there's a bit of a shirt, and then the bottom of his pants. So I'd be playing cricket for my home team in Williams, which is a country team down south, and I'd put myself out gully being the captain, and I'd have a hat just like Joel Garner, and I'd get a jock strap just like him and try and put my shirt in the same place as him. He was absolutely sensational. But the athleticism, what West Indies cricket brings to the game, it disappoints me that you don't get more financial help because it just seems to be going all one way. And there's other teams out there like Sri Lanka that have done wonders in the game. We want to bring the associate nations in there. How do we divvy it up is the big question moving forward. And I'm not going to put you on that spot because you're still playing and you're in a leadership role. So it's quite tough. And hearing you bring that up, it's sort of saddens me in a way because West Indies have marketed the game in such a wonderful way, and it wouldn't be the same where it is right now without the West Indies players in it, because you've got the power, the athleticism, and everything like that. Now, but moving even further into those selection issues. Because of the financial scenarios, you've got the likes of Andre Russell, Chris Gale. Well, Chris Gale played over 100 tests, so bravo. All the guys going out there trying to play T20 franchises, it's probably a bit like New Zealand as well. They're trying to make up for lost income that they're making with the West Indies. And with these tournaments, there's a lot of chopping and changing with the teams. You can't get a consistent team for the West Indies because of these T20 tournaments. How difficult is that for a leader, management side of things, just with the chopping and changing of players in your 11s?
No, it's extremely difficult, man. Over my tenure as captain, that was a main issue, where you had guys who wanted to play World Cups, but didn't necessarily want to commit to the build up to a World Cup. And it's clear because of the financial gain that they would make outside of West Indies cricket. And you can't fault them. You want to maximize your earning power in what little time you have as a cricketer. So from a personal standpoint, I could understand it, but then from you look at it from a organizational standpoint, it's a hard pill to swallow, because yes, you want the product to be more attractive. Yes, they bring value to the product, and yes, we do want them for World Cups, but there's a lot more that goes on behind actually going to play a World Cup, and leading up to a World Cup is equally as important, if not even more important, than the actual World Cup, because you then need to build that foundation for what will get you over the line in the World Cup. That is an ongoing battle. I've seen guys who probably hadn't played for West Indies in 2-3 years pop up out of the wilderness, maybe a tournament before the World Cup, do reasonably well or do well, and walk right back into a West Indies team. Whereas you've had guys busting their chops for the last 2-3 years trying to stay in and do justice to themselves. And you may not set the world alight, but you may not disgrace yourself as well. But then you just pushed aside because quote unquote the superstars are back. And as a player particularly, it's not been fair. And I just think that's the dilemma West Indies cricket is faced with. And I don't think the management of players has been great. And I particularly just don't feel as though we've been firm enough with setting policies and sticking to them.
Yep.
And I could go on and on and on and talk about this, because it's happened from a fitness standpoint where you've got fitness standards in place, and certain are carried out for some individuals, and then other individuals are they're given exemptions and different leeways. So, and that goes from fitness to playing and whatever else, man. And players within the dressing room see this, and then there's no trust, and how can I commit to something where I'm not sure of a future? And nothing is guaranteed, don't get me wrong, but in certain systems you can see an actual build-up, you can see an actual method and means of doing things. I'm not sure you could ever get a trend of patterns within West Indies cricket in terms of decisions made. It's always sporadic, it always fluctuates, and there's no consistency, and that brings mistrust, between players who trust in the board and the system, and then the actual system that is rolled out and the consistency with it, So that's just that was one of my biggest challenges as captain, and thank God that I have that headache. I no longer have that headache to deal with now, but somebody else does, and I always feel for the next individual, who's got to deal with it.
Do you think if you had better finances from the ICC and better help from the rest of the world, that would alleviate those issues, and you'll be able to, so then those particular players that are playing T20 tournaments will play less T20 tournaments because they're getting what they are actually worth playing for the West Indies? Do you think that would alleviate the selection issues?
Look, Hoggy, what I would say is currently the model that the ICC has in place in terms of their dispensation of funds is not going to be sustainable. Currently, you just got all the host boards collecting 100% revenue for any bilateral series. Now, the money that we get from, for example, from ICC cannot sustain West Indies cricket based on how expensive it is to put cricket on here in the Caribbean. At present, we only make money from 2 series, which would be England and India. I think we may break even with Australia and Pakistan, but everybody else is at a loss. And that's just mainly down to the fact that we can't command TV rates such as in Australia and England, India, and actually make money from the product. So where we have an issue is that we may play England every 2 or 3 years. We may play India. Well, we play India pretty regularly, but in 1 or 2 formats. But whatever money we get from there might be able to hold us over for a year and a half maximum. And that's just really to pay bills, pay all the expenses. Yes, we pull in TV revenue from here and there, but we gotta admit that we make a significant loss going on away tours, whereas we fund flights, allowances, and then obviously match fees. So that could equate to a significant amount. And then all these other home series which we play outside of India and England, we operate at a massive loss. So bearing in mind we have women's cricket to fund, youth cricket to fund, and then obviously men's cricket, senior men's cricket to fund, it becomes a significant expense. Now, one of the things that I have spoken about in the past on record is having a more sustainable model, whereas the visiting team gets a percentage of the revenues. So if it's an 80-20 split where if I go to Australia, I get 20% of their revenues for that tour. Australia comes to us, they get 20% of our revenues. Then I think overall, that's one way in which money could continuously, keep circulating. I don't know if it'll be enough to keep us in the green, but it may be enough to sustain us better over a longer period of time. Whether or not we're just having to go from here and there, trying to borrow money and then pay back on money that we think is going to come in and these things. Like I could safely say in West Indies cricket, we're not in luxury to be paid on time, just mainly because we just don't have the funds or the cash flow right there and then. So, I played series early in the year, which is still haven't, we've been played up to now, but I've gone months without being paid, for match fees that is, and that's just because there's just no cash flow. And these are things that I have no problem speaking openly about, because I feel as though people need to understand the discrepancies in the entire system of cricket, and it's not the fault of Australia, it's not the fault of India. They definitely do command majority TV rates and they've got the viewership, so yes, give them a bigger piece of the pie, but the massive piece of the pie you're giving them then puts the other nations a lesser, a greater disadvantage, I would say. And I look at associate cricket. We just had a T20 World Cup where guys, this is the first time guys would have come together maybe in years, because of COVID. They haven't played any cricket leading up to it. And I think associate cricket is next to impossible to develop. It is just impossible. Like we just basically doing them a favor and having them and basically saving face of the product, but we don't actually care about them. I just don't feel like it's they actually cares about them, because what they say is that we've ticked the box, we've funded them, but do the funds have any impact on their development? No, because those funds just go directly back into bringing them to a tournament, trying to have a bilateral series. They probably play 2 series in a year, two home series, if so much, or maybe 1 home series in a year. And how is that going to develop them and develop cricket? The current model now of international cricket is just not sustainable for most, and associate teams is impossible. It's just impossible for them to get any better.
I totally agree with you. I did a bit with PNG. Andy Bickle was started up there many moons ago, and most of those players, I reckon 90% of the players just come from a little village, a small little village, and we used to get a ute, drive down there, and they'd all jump in the back of the ute and we'd go up and do the training and everything like that. And it's just amazing how advanced they've got to be able to play in a T20 tournament, World Cup tournament. Now, if they were able to be exposed to a little bit better cricket and pop down here and play Australia A or some of the State A teams, their cricket's going to be improving and they're going to be a little bit more competitive when they get there. So, no, it's tough. But anyway, let's get off the politics and let's get into this Pat Cummins thing with the captaincy of the team. Now, he's a fast bowler. You're a fast bowler. How mentally draining is it for a fast bowler to captain a team compared to a batsman? And you're an all-rounder. Adding that to it, you had to go out there and make some runs. Yeah,
I mean, from a personal standpoint, I've always tried to put my cricket first, especially leading up to any game. So I try to get my preparation in and then just try to broaden that out and focus on other individuals. I found it. I think captaincy is a challenge in itself. I think one of the things that Pat would have to really think about is how to then deal with himself personally. He's obviously had tons of issues with his body in the past, and just trying to stay fit and healthy on the park. Australia's always had a really good system in terms of rotation. So I was actually pretty surprised that he was actually named Test captain. Just mainly the fact because they've always managed workloads really well, and really had a system. Because you've had Starkey, you've had him, you've had a lot of Australian fast bowlers who've had tons of stress fractures and such. So it's always trying to keep them cotton wool and not overwork them too much. So it was a little bit of a surprise, but it was great to see as well too, because it then ticks off a box in terms of, yes, we can have a fast bowling captain. We can have a player in the team who's not a batsman. Just captain the side. And it's really good to see, and I was really happy for him. And the way they've gone in the first Test match. Just seeing them, play and play the way they played. So, look, I think he's just got to really just understand how to deal with himself first, and then just dealing with individuals. The greatest leaders to me have great communication skills in terms of getting a message across to their personnel. And he's just got to build a relationship, which I'm sure he's going to have. And I've seen Australian systems where you're pretty much your brother's keeper. People are genuinely for your success. So I think he'll have those relationships already built, but it's just mainly how to harness that on the field. How to get the best of the players on the field. And he's got the wealth of experience around him. You've got Smudge, who's been around captaining for a number of years and still playing. Davy's been in a leadership post. You've got Finchy in the one-day post as well. So you've got people around him who he can definitely lean on for that experience. And then obviously tons of guys who would have played before who are still directly involved in Australian cricket. Yeah,
Smudge for everyone out there, that's Stephen Smith, who's captaining today because while we're doing this interview, Australia are playing their second Test, and Pat Cummins is sat next to someone with COVID in a restaurant, so he's not allowed to play. So he's been sent home. So while he's going through a tough spell, or I'll just go back a little bit. So you've got all your fast bowlers and your spinners in the team. Do you set the fields, or do you back them to have their preparation for their game plans against opposition players, and you only step in when you think there needs to be a slight change in the game plan that they're trying to execute?
Yeah, spot on. I think I will only get involved when things aren't going as you planned it. So you obviously know what you want to execute and accomplish as a bowler or batter. So I give you the leeway to do that, man. I think you're experienced enough and knowledgeable enough about the game to know what you want to do. So I just think I would really need to step in on that regard when things necessarily aren't going the way they're meant to be. I think from a captaincy standpoint, that part is pretty easy. Where it's not to say I have to think for an individual. I give you the leeway and I give you the responsibility to make decisions. When things aren't going as planned, then we come together, we have another discussion about it, where we throw a plan. If that doesn't work again, we come back together. But that's just the way it has to go. You've got to give responsibility to individuals and give them that sense of appreciation, knowing that I back you not only because I know your skill and talent, but I know that you've got solid plans, and you can think like the leader. I think the more you have your teammates thinking as leaders, the more minds are ticking. And I think the more minds that are ticking, the more information you get shared, the more observations you get, you pick up, and you got a better sense and a better source of knowledge, which is key and obviously key in tight situations and tough times.
What about when you've got a junior coming in, like Richardson's playing, Pat's not actually captain of that, but you've got Richardson or a Nisa that's just playing his first game and relatively inexperienced out Test cricket. How much more of a workload on helping them on the mental aspect and the game plans out in the middle, do you have to work a little bit harder with those particular players, the new players that are in the team?
Well, I would think somebody like Michael Nisa, who's played a lot of first class cricket, you probably wouldn't need to do that much. For him, it's just, controlling his emotions in terms of the occasion and helping him, get around that. Jai Richardson, for example, he's played a fair bit of first-class cricket as well. You know, what I've had in my experience as captain of West Indies is you've had guys who haven't played much first-class cricket. So it's basically you learning how to play international, or you learn how to play top-level professional cricket at the highest level. So I've had Azari Joseph coming out on 19 cricket, you know, so he's basically young,
what a
vibrant, but very fresh. You know, Jaden Seals just came into our team. When I was captain, Shannon Gabriel was probably less than 20 test matches into his career.
Yep.
So, but again, not a huge set of first-class cricket behind him, you know, and that's the massive difference between us and in Australia. You know, I'm sure Michael Ness has probably played close to 100 first-class games, you know, probably before playing this first test match. We've not got a guy in the Caribbean who's played anywhere near to 100 first-class games. Well, probably for Veerasamy Permaul, who's been around for ages, but he probably still hasn't played 100 first-class games for Ghana. So you then understand like the difference in teams. So for someone like a Michael Ness, I would assume that there's not much you need to come and tell him about his actual plans because he's played so much cricket at first-class level. But for a guy like an Alzari Joseph who's coming out on 9 cricket, I may have to get. So for me, I have to spend a lot more time before the game trying to help them to open up their minds to think on just get a sense of what they're thinking, you know, their kind of style and their plans. And it may just be able to tweak here and there to say, well, look, I rather than do this, maybe try this. And if that doesn't work, then we go back to your plan and we come back together and then have more of a discussion on it. But that has been my biggest challenge in trying to almost teach guys or nurture guys on the spot at the highest level because they just haven't had that luxury of playing much first-class cricket.
Yeah, because when I look at Cummins and I look at our lineup, Hazelwood's very reliable, but Mitchell Starc is sort of on and off. And I'm not having a go at Mitchell Starc in this scenario because he's a strike bowler and he tries to get wickets and he's in there to get wickets. And every now and then it's going to go very south very quickly and he's going to get pounded. When you've got a situation like that with one of your bowlers and the opposition taking the game away from you, Pat Cummins, how would you console someone like a Mitchell Starc just with the emotions where he's dropped off, but then still focused on what you've got to do at the other end? Because surely it's got to affect your performance when you've got to step up to the mark, thinking about, can I bowl Mitchell Starc out the other end? Who am I going to bowl instead of Mitchell Starc? Because I need him to lift.
Yeah, for one, I know you can't hide him. That's one of the things I've learned as well. I think in those situations, right, you've got to almost pull the other guys who are in the attack with you and say to them, well, look, Starkey isn't having a great time or we would like to give him a lot more leeway to express himself. So we as the other members of the cohort, we need to be a little bit more or a little bit less attacking, or we just need to be a bit smarter in the way we go about field placing because we got to give him as much leeway as possible. So I've been always a workhorse within our bowling attack. So I would bowl longer spells. I would come in and just grind out. So I've always had my mindset on that. Somebody like a Kemar Roach can do that as well, you know. But I've had like Shannon Gabriel, who is a bit like Starkey, where you are asking them to give their all in short bursts, and could be expensive, you know. But we know that they could break a game open for us. So you then say to myself and Kemar, who've got the skill to not only hold a length and be tidy, but be challenging within that area as well to get wickets. So it's a luxury of having those us two in the attack to give Shannon that leeway to express himself. The other issue may come is you almost need a third bowler to give you that kind of luxury. So you got to hope that Alzari, as a young fast bowler coming in, can do it, or not be as erratic as a Shannon. Or you got to make sure you got a solid spinner who can tie up one end for you and may not necessarily be a wicket taker or match winner, but just be very, very tidy. That way we have 3 bowlers that you can just really depend on, and you give the other faster bowlers or strike bowlers more of a leeway to express themselves. So it may not necessarily be you having much to say to a Starkey per se, but you get in and around the other guys to say, well, look, this is what I expect of you. We need this from you, you know, in order to make the overall plan of our cohort come together and work.
Right. And Spinners. I never really liked batsmen captaining spinners. We're a different breed. How did you go about with the spinners? Because that would be a hard focus, because you've got to bowl the long spells out the other end. Spinners get through their overs pretty quickly, and the quicker the over gets through, the less rest you've got. So how do you operate with the spinners on a mental side of things, to where Pat Cummins is going to have to utilise those skills with Nathan Lyon?
Yeah, it is a challenge, bowling in tandem with him. But I feel as though I got less to think about when I'm actually bowling, so I probably may one bowl more overs. But I think these spinners, it depends on the stage of the game. I don't think we've ever had the luxury of match-winning spinners. And history will show, from a spin bowling perspective in Caribbean cricket, we haven't had great spinners at international level. We have had spinners who filled the gap and been able to do a very, very tidy job. And depending on where we go in terms of conditions, we can take them perhaps in the subcontinent and they'd be relatively effective. But in terms of being match winners, I don't think we've had a match winning spinner for a very, very, very long time. You can look at like a Warren, you can look at Amir Lithuanian, you can look at even a Nathan Lyon. Look at these guys' records. You could safely say these guys can be a match winner in most conditions that they could come up in. I think Nathan Lyon should be credited so much more than he actually is, in my opinion, just because he's played a handful of games in Australia. And you for one know how difficult it is for a spinner, whether it be a finger spinner or a wrist spinner, to bowl in those conditions at test level. And to get the success in which he's had, I think he should be very proud of what he's achieved, man. And knowing where he's come from, being part of the ground staff and then, getting the opportunity to play international cricket, but not only getting the opportunity, but grabbing it and developing. I remember when Gaz first came on the scene, I actually played against him in the Caribbean a couple of years back, and I mean, he was real loopy and floaty, and I almost feel like I had enough time to do anything I wanted to do with him. But now you see him, he's got a lot more zip on it. His variations have definitely improved, and that is a testament to his success, particularly in Australia. And I've been in Australia. I've not seen many spinners to be very, very successful in Australia. Look, he's done an amazing job. But if you've got a luxury of a spinner of his quality, then you could afford to rotate anybody from the other end, because guys, what he's going to produce. I think the issue may come when you have spinners who may not be as consistent to do that holding job, particularly in probably days 1, 2, and 3, to then give them the luxury to come into the game more in day 4 and 5. And then that puts some heavier workload, obviously, on the fast bowlers. And maybe if you've got a guy like a Starkey who you want to give that role to express himself to, you may try to continue to hone him in because of not having the luxury of having consistency and pressure built on the other end.
Yeah, well, Starkey would be in a bit of a pickle if we had to change spinners. But people were talking about getting Swepson in there because he's more of a wicket taker, but they don't realise the role that Nathan Lyon actually plays. And if you look at the wickets compared to yesteryear when I was playing, and I'm not taking anything away of the greats there, they don't have as much rough as what they had many moons ago. So that I reckon Nathan Lyon is one of the best spinners the world's ever seen. And I'm going to put him up there with the Shane Warne because he's just so consistent, does his job. And if it wasn't for him in the team, our quicks wouldn't be as lively. Now, just a final question with the captaincy, because you brought up going to India there. And I actually didn't even think about this with Pat Cummins. And I'm glad that you brought it up. So going to England will be all right for him because it's cool conditions over there, not that rough. But when you go to the subcontinent, and it's going to be friendlier wickets over there, and you're going to have to think a lot deeper in your plans out in the middle. You have to be adaptable out in the middle, and you have to be thinking on your feet a lot more than what he will be in Australia. How much more pressure is it going to the subcontinent and on your own home conditions?
I think in the subcontinent, conditions would obviously take effect. So spinners do the bulk of the work there, man. Yeah, I think certainly in places where you're playing with a kookaburra ball in the subcontinent, you literally get one spell as a seamer, and I just been to Sri Lanka. Our seamers basically have one spell up front, basically in the first innings as well too. So we have one spell up front, and then spinners just took the ball. Like Sri Lanka opened the ball in the second innings with a spinner. We opened the ball in the second innings with a spinner. So yeah, I literally had like 2, 3, 4, 3, because you really want to maximize the harder ball as a spinner in those conditions as well too, because that's where most of the damage is done. So I had like literally 3 overs with it up front, and then you just throw the ball in the spinner's hand. So I mean, Pat may face a similar situation, where you go in those conditions and you may not have to have a huge workload as a fast bowler, because these conditions are so much suited towards spin. So it could work. It could be hard if you've got conditions that you're gonna have a spell where you gotta grind out, man. Right? A couple of spells you're gonna have to grind out and put in the hard yards. Yes, but then you would always think as a fast bowler in those conditions that your workload would not be as significant as, for instance, if you're playing in Australia, South Africa, where conditions are more suited towards fast bowling. So it kind of would work out itself in a way, but it's just the particular period to play.
Yep. Now, all right, we're going to leave on one note to help all the viewers out there, because they're all young and they're looking for the future, and they all want to become leaders, don't you? All the fans out there. Now, give some tips, or give one of your best tips, being the leader of the West Indies, that has helped you in that particular role, that would help generations coming through that want to be leaders in their field.
My biggest piece of advice is get to know your individuals, get to know your players. Because ultimately, those are the guys you're asking to go through walls for you. And if you're going to ask a guy to run through a wall for you, man, he's got to have 100% trust and transparency in you and what you're thinking and the way you operate. And likewise, you've got to understand him day in, day out to know how he reacts to different situations, his different moods, because we're all going to wake up sometimes not in the same state. You got to understand how people react in these different states. So my biggest piece of advice is get to know your players, get to know what gets them going and ticking, and get to know how to G them up, when they need a bit of a kick, where, I mean, everybody goes through it. So you just need to know the individuals, and I feel once you know them, then captaincy and leadership becomes so much easier, because that if I want to, for instance, speak to Hoggy, I may not have the best relationship with Hoggy, or I may not be on a level that Brett Lee may be on with Hoggy. So, but I may ask Brett, so Brett, here's what I'm thinking, like, can you help me, sue this over with Hoggy and, get this plan over to Hoggy, or this message over. So, those are the kind of things that you need to develop. You're not going to have the best of relationships with each and every individual. It's impossible. But there are individuals in the team who gravitate towards one another, who have closer friendships. But if you understand that dynamic, then well, I could go to James to speak to Hoggy, because James and Hoggy are very, very, very close mates. Or I could go to Peter to speak to Michael, because Peter and Michael get along really well. And just getting that message across. But they have to understand you, and they have to have trust in you to know that this is exactly what it is. There's no agendas. There's nothing behind it, but merely just for the betterment of the team and us getting on the same page.
That is perfect advice, because the years that I was playing for Australia through that 2000 period, we had personality tests, and we'll put in profiles: Mozzie, thinker, feeler, enforcer. And if someone wasn't switched on, we knew their personality type, and we knew the words that we had to tell them to get them back focused onto the role. And I've got a vlog there with Mozzie earlier, or through this particular series of interviews, if you want to go down there and have a look at personality traits. Now, Jason, thanks very much for joining me. We first met in Kolkata Knight Riders, and it was a lovely experience to see you there. But it's just great to see you still playing the game of cricket and still having a lot of success around the world. And always enjoyed it. And hopefully this is not the last time we speak on Hogg's vlog, and we'll keep in touch through other lines of communication as well. Thanks very much for joining me, Jason, and we'll catch you soon. Good luck to the West Indies cricket on their next adventure.
Thanks, Hoggy. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure, man. I will definitely stay in touch.
Thanks, mate. Cheers.